Okay, so good evening, everyone. We're here for the community meeting number 13, October 11, 2017. We're going to discuss the status of the former Marbledale Quarry site. Hey, Melba. If this goes beyond 8 o'clock, feel free to shout out Yankee scores at any time in the presentation.
Right, exactly. That's a big problem.
Okay, so first thing we'll talk about the status of the pile drilling. EBC Environmental Bulkheading Corp. continued using 2 drill rigs and mud rotary at the site. Sarah. The final hotel pad and pile was drilled on August 22nd. Camp stations were used to monitor the site during all pile drilling. Vapor monitoring of the designated vapor wells was performed during all pile drilling work, and we'll talk about that more as we move on. If you've seen this site, this is kind of what it looks like. There's a drill rig in the background, a generator, a compressor in the foreground, and a recirculation tank here on the left side. During the pile drilling, the vapor monitoring was as follows. The village consultant HDR and DEC and HES agreed upon which wells should be monitored for vapors using a PID, FID, and a 4-gas meter during all pile work. HES monitored vapor levels in all agreed upon wells in the localized areas of pile work each day. Vapor monitoring was performed at selected wells, a minimum of once every 3 hours while work continued. If anybody wants to see that info, we file daily reports. I believe, Dave, they're posted, right? They're all posted. HDR has them, DEC has them, Village has them. Up to 3 rounds of vapor monitoring occurred each day, depending on how long the contractor worked on a given day. All results were shared with DEC and HDR on a daily basis. Here's an example, vapor well monitoring. This is a vapor well here. Our little wagon with the FID, PID, 4-gas meter. Our group goes around in a round-robin fashion during the drilling, measures the headspace, writes it down on a field form, keep an eye on things, and then we submit them to the village and the DEC. Now go back a second, Pat. At times, if anybody's looked at them, there has been some elevated vapors, just FYI. So everybody should know that. You can see it. We'll talk a little bit more about that as we move on. As part of the whole work plan, we had to do groundwater monitoring and sampling of existing wells. So we did a 3rd round in July. We sampled monitor well 1, observation well 1, 2, bedrock well 2, observation well 3, and bedrock well 3. We sampled using low flow techniques, sent to a New York State certified lab, and the results have been received and shared with HDR and the DEC. I think to date, a bunch of results still have not been validated, but a lot of stuff that's posted has been validated and accepted into the Brownfield program. During a lot of this excavation, stormwater system installation, site grading, site prep, etc., we encountered a lot of cosmetic material, which were Revlon products. It says right on the canisters, Revlon, so that's why we're saying that. Here's an example. The blue arrows represent a lot of the canisters or face cream, aerosols, things like that we uncovered during the excavation. Additional cosmetic material, including Revlon products, were discovered during the excavation. That included drainage sewer systems on July 20th, 31st, August 1st, August 14th, September 13th, October 3rd, and October 6th. The materials were stockpiled, sorted, placed in drums for off-site disposal and removal. We sent samples of canisters to a lab, and we have a bunch of results back And a lot of stuff that was in the canisters, especially the aerosols, we think is related to some of the constituents of concern we see on site, like Freon and some other volatile organic compounds. That stuff, that'll eventually be available too if it's not already. Is that out there yet?
No, I don't think so.
Anyway, that'll.
Like how many barrels?
I think. Do you know how many?
20 something.
We have probably 20 or 30 drums,
How big are the
55 gallon. And then I know for a fact I've been on site, and Ron might know this better than me. He's in the audience, but I think there were 2 or 3 20-yard dumpsters, right? Sealed with. Initially.
When we did SA3.
When we excavated source area 3, remember the source areas? I think there were, the guys, Revlon's consultant was down there, and I kind of gave him a tour with some of our guys, and I think there were 3 20-yard dumpsters,
Yes.
sealed, covered in, like for lack of a better word, a tarp with an elastic band, and they like snooped around and collected samples and documented, etc. So there was a lot of this stuff buried there.
That's in addition to these 20 to 30.
Yes.
Yep. Actually, Sarah, the dumpsters were precursor
Right.
to a lot of the drums, okay? And it's cost a lot of money to get this stuff disposed of. Like, nobody wants to take it, and you got to go through chaining, all kinds of analysis and chain of custody, etc. So, but some of it's still staged on site. Here's just some more examples of us excavating. Here's a pile with stuff being segregated. Same here. That's a trench. What do they call those again?
That's a trench box.
Trench box. Thank you. And you can see the stuff in the foreground there that we were uncovering. More cans. That's actually one of Revlon's consultants, a geologist. They're out of the Syracuse area. What's their name again? FPM. That's the company that's working for Revlon. He was down a bunch with another one of his colleagues, and then there's some of the drums you can see being staged with the stuff in it.
Why did the Revlon come down? Why did they hire us?
All right, so Melba has a question. Can you just hold that, and
Yep.
we'll answer it when we're done. Thank you. All right, so I mentioned that during the pile installation, we were monitoring. And we started to see some elevated levels of VOCs based on the monitoring with an FID and a PID. We kind of interfaced with the DEC and HDR, and we decided that it's probably a good idea during the drilling operation to do some temporary soil venting. So we got a regenerative blower, hooked it up to 2 carbon drums, carried it over to multiple wellheads where we were seeing some elevated soil vapor concentrations. And then we vented. We actually pulled air out of the ground with a blower, ran it through carbon to treat the air, and then have a whole bunch. There's all kinds of data from monitoring that system, and that started in probably early August and continued after we noticed the elevated concentrations till maybe, when did the piles finish, Ron? Early October? Well, it doesn't.
Middle of September.
All right, so anyway, so everybody knows, found the vapors, mitigated because we were concerned that they might travel off-site. The mitigation measure was portable soil vapor extraction. When we stopped the piles because we were done, that system stopped, okay? And so another question, just write it down, and if we have to flip back to a slide or whatever, we can, okay? Did I miss anything there? I think we covered it. Okay, everybody knows there's a proposed restaurant on site. In order to revise, pinpoint, confirm what needed to be done for that restaurant pad and construction, the site geotech people, Carl and Simpson, right, Ron? Carl?
Yes.
They requested some additional borings, a group named General Boring, GBI, came out there, installed 2 borings in the footprint of the restaurant on August 28th, September 1 and 6. And we just showing everybody that same situation went on, camp monitoring, community air monitoring plan stations were in place, soil vapor monitoring was in place. Basically the whole agreed upon remedial action work plan during piles was implemented during the drilling. And that information that they collected, General Boring and under Carlin Simpson's guise, was used to kind of tweak the restaurant pad and foundation design. I don't think that's finalized, right? They're still like looking at that stuff and figuring it out. There was a fractionation tank. You saw a picture of it, that Adler tank. It's a 10,000 gallon tank. That's been on site with water for 4 or 5 months. We set up a disposal scenario where a vacuum truck came and made 2 trips, emptied it. The liquid was taken off site at the approved disposal facility. And then once it was emptied, because it was in the way of ongoing construction, it was moved to the north end of the site so that where it was staged could be reconfigured into the construction process. If you recall, some of the remedial action work plan it was approved was how are we going to deal with these soil vapors we're seeing. So that's going to be twofold approach. One is under both buildings, SubSlab Depressurization System, SSDS. So our site engineer, a guy named John Ashley, who some of you guys might have met or seen around, he works for a company called DuBois & King. We did a bunch of testing, if you remember, soil vapor extraction, soil vapor sampling, and we passed on our results to John and his group, and they've come up with a SubSlab Depressurization system design for both the hotel and the restaurant. The red lines are, SubSlab piping. There's multiple blowers. It's being vented up through the roof line through carbon. This is better. Go to the next picture. This is some of the cross-sectional details. The engineering details. This stuff will all be on the record. You can see where some of the pipes, the vertical pipes coming up through the concrete slab. A slotted lateral line cross section. So basically, if you're not familiar with it, you take a long 4 or 6 inch PVC slotted pipe, you lay it out in the ground, you pack it in crushed stone or gravel, put a vapor barrier on top, connect it to a blower. When vapors come up emanate from the subsurface soils, it collects them, runs them through carbon, treats them, and vents them. So that prevents any vapors from coming into the building, and that's pretty common practice. And this has been designed, and this is approved. It's already been submitted. HDR reviewed it, DEC reviewed it. It's already been approved by those entities, and it's on the record. And Ron and his group, Peak, and the concrete people are incorporating this as we speak into the construction process. When they pour, just as an example, when they pour a pile cap or a concrete girder or something like that, if the lines cross it, they put in a sleeve, pour the concrete around it so then the pipe can be carried through, and that's going on right now. Okay, so soil vapor extraction design. This is a different scenario. This is a system that's designed to treat soil vapors, mostly volatile organic compounds that are observed in the soil vapor beneath the site. And these, each of these black circles represent a well and the radius of influence of that well based on testing. And then there's a bunch of overlay maps. If you look in the upper right corner, the yellow outline represents a certain concentration. The green outline represents a certain concentration that was observed. And then based on soil permeability in the unsaturated zone, we get together with the engineers and we design a system that will encompass the impacted areas, pull the soil vapor out, treat it, and then discharge it to the atmosphere. So that's what you're looking at there, multiple maps. So yellow's Freon, green is PCE, blue is, can you read that? Benzene, okay? So where's benzene on there? See that? I don't see it. It might be on a different map. But you get the idea, like, suffice it to say, the central and north central areas of the site had significant concentrations of soil vapor for those constituents, and that's where the SVE is focused. And it's been designed to allow for minimal trenching and disturbance, to propose curbing and parking lots and etc., and just carry all the vertical wells, the SVE wells, into one area. It's all been centralized, so it's not like 3 or 4 different SVE systems operating at once. It's all been centralized to one location. Here's a cross-section of an engineering cross-section. So just taking you through left to right. Vapor wells, those vertical rectangles. They remove the vapors, discharge them to that, here in the middle, that's called a knockout drum. So when there's moisture in the soil vapor that's removed, it comes into the high velocity, it hits that knockout drum, and the velocity drops off, and the moisture drops out, and then it goes through the carbon drums and off to the atmosphere. And then this stuff up above is telemetry, like flow rates, concentration in the influent, and so on. It's monitored on a continuous basis. So that's kind of a schematic flow diagram of how it works. Hey, Mike.
Hey.
Good, how are you? Okay, one of the parts of the work plan that we have to still implement is the long-term monitoring well installation. So the red dots there's the site, and the red dots on this map represent where we're going to install nested couplets of wells. So if you've been to these meetings and planning board meetings, etc., you know that we're monitoring both the overburden and the bedrock, which is the dolomite or the marble. And after we went through a bunch of analysis with the DEC, we decided a couple things. One, 2 or 3 wells that were destroyed in construction would have to be replaced. Which color's that? I can't read that, but I think it's 3 wells that we destroyed. Orange.
The 2 orange on the left.
The 2 orange on the left. That one was destroyed, and that one was destroyed, so we're replacing those. And then the red are proposed wells. So just kind of the iterations back and forth with the DEC. Kevin Carpenter and I were on the phone for a bunch of times. One of them was like, for example, well, I think in this area we hit that liquid oil, right, which we're going to talk about. So we hit free-phase product there. Maybe you guys remember that. And we grabbed a sample, and we sent it to the lab, and it came back as diesel fuel, number 2 fuel oil. So one of the things we said was, well, if you hit free product there, you better put some wells, see what the extent is, and see what's going on. So that's kind of how this rationale worked. Like a well went there, and then some over here with some higher concentrations, right here, of like Freon and other VOCs. So we added wells there. And that's what's proposed, and that's going to get done when the site reaches grade and the binder goes down. We'll probably put the wells in. We don't want to do it before that, because they're just going to get damaged during construction. How many, what is it, like 8? What we designed, 8 sets?
Yeah.
I think it's around 8 nested sets, a nested pair, so a total of 16 wells. And if you remember, the Rockwells will be anywhere from 40 to 90 feet deep. And the overburden wells and the fill material will be anywhere from 20, 25 to 60 or 70, maybe even 80. The one last, source area removal. We didn't finish to date source area 4 along the northern side wall to remove remaining Freon materials. Right now it's under a giant stockpile. When the site gets reconfigured and regraded and it's exposed, we'll go after that and get it done. You want to go back to that site plan a second? So I think FYI, Ron, if I'm incorrect, let me know. I think SA4 is like right in here. Is that right? Further north?
Yeah, right about, a little to the left.
Right there.
Right about there.
Okay, so right here, that's going to be removed still. We know it's there. It's the last one we didn't completely get. And once that site's reconfigured and regraded, it's accessible, we'll remove it. Okay, so in the Brownfield program, there's a whole set of milestones that you have to meet. And the remaining milestones, reporting-wise, are the site management plan, which is like a phone book thick report, which describes the remedial program, describes the engineering and institutional controls, for example, site-wide cap, soil vapor extraction system, SubSlab Depressurization system, long-term monitor wells, and groundwater monitoring sampling, etc. Then there's an O&M plan. I think someone brought up 2 or 3 meetings ago, it might have been Melba or somebody, well, so you got SSDS, you got SVE, so what? Who's looking at it, who's monitoring it? That's all in the SMP, and it's part of the program, so somebody actually has to be on board. And as an example, monthly, bi-monthly, whatever it is, has to go there and check on the system, check readings, make sure everything's functional, make sure there's no breakthrough in the carbon, make sure the blowers are working, make sure the vacuum's where it's supposed to be, and so on. And that's all in the SMP. And that stays on site. It's on the public record here in the village, and it's also on with the DEC. And then after the inspections are complete by people like us, we have to report back to the DEC on monthly or quarterly reports, and we have to certify that everything we saw and said was what we saw and said. The second major component that's still left to do is the final engineering report, and that's a lot of work. So much stuff is going to be in that. So, for example, the tanks we pulled, if everybody remembers, like last, what was that, April? That's going to be summarized in the FER. The soil vapor extraction test, that's going to be summarized and outlined in the FER. The SSDS and SVE design in the FER. All the drilling, every stage of drilling, from the supplemental environmental investigation, which happened early spring, from there moving forward, all the new wells we put in, the logs, the depth to water we find, groundwater samples, all that stuff's going to be in there. Summaries and details and engineering schematics of engineering and institutional controls will be in there. So there's going to be a deed notice or an environmental easement on this site. And that says that if any group or entity comes in there and the hotel says, well, you know what, we decided we're going to add, we have to dig an extra electric line to the building from the street. Well, there's an environmental easement that says, well, you guys need to know that when you excavate, you could potentially encounter impacted soils. If you hit within the cap, a demarcation layer, then there's a whole sequence of events and protocols they have to follow, and that's all going to be outlined in both of these documents. So some contractor can't just come in there and say, you know what, we need a storm soil vault here, just go ahead. It's not like if you had a commercial property in Larchmont, for any town around here, and you got approval with the town to put in a storm sewer vault or some precast concrete structure, you can just go ahead and dig once you have the approval. Here you have to follow protocol, dispose of the soil properly, make sure your people are aware of it, they're wearing their personal protective equipment and so on. That's what that says. Everybody knows the future site development. There's going to be a hotel, restaurant, and associated parking. And then, so what's next over the next 3 months, let's say, 4 months? We're going to cap the site with item 4 and QP, along with crushed stone to act as a temporary cap. This will continue during stormwater retention basin culvert piping installation. We're going to excavate SA4, as I mentioned. We're going to finalize the designs for the SSDS and SVE, install those systems, As I said, the SSDS has been approved, so that's probably ready to roll in like the next 2 weeks. And then the SVE, I was emailing John from dinner tonight. That's probably going to be done maybe next week, submitted for final approval. Just FYI for everybody, the SVE, these two systems have gone through, probably this would be the third review. This will be the third review of the SVE. Now the SSDS is already approved. And then we're going to do the monitor well pairs. That's a typo. It's more than 3. I think it's like 6 or 7. But we can go back to the map if anybody cares and count. But we're going to put in those new monitor well pairs. That'll probably get done sometime in November, December. And those wells will be in. Anything else? And that's it for now. I know there were 2 questions, so Melba had a question first. We can answer that one.
Yeah, why does Revlon have a consultant down there?
All right, so the question was, why does Revlon have a consultant down there? And the abridged version of the answer to that is, Revlon is a contributing source. Exactly. So Melba just said, contributing responsible party. They dump stuff there. It's looking like, I mean, there's a lot of legwork to do still, but it's looking like some of the stuff they dump there may be impacting soil and groundwater. If that's proven out and that's the case, then it's likely there'll be an RP, responsible party. Yeah, I think when I mentioned the name Revlon, they like beamed down a laser and shut the mic off. But anyway, to Melba's point, if you are documented as an RP, then they may end up pitching in and reimbursing for a lot of the investigatory and cleanup work on this site. So don't run home and say, hey, Revlon's an RP. All I'm saying is if it's proven out and they are through the proper channels, proven to be an RP, then they're going to be responsible for some of the reimbursement of a lot of the work that's been done here. Something else we should mention, because I talked. The rain? They want me to go home and watch the Yankees. So one thing I wanted to mention, because I did have this conversation with the DEC, in this whole scenario that we've been dealing with now for 2 or 3 years, the 2 sites north, right, the P sites, potential hazardous waste sites that the DEC designated, and Kevin wanted me to convey this, the DEC wanted me to convey this at this meeting. They've, I got some notes, hold on, let me get it right. So there's 2 P sites to the north, and there's 2 to the south. And they're all associated with this former quarry and dumping things into the quarry. They're hoping to start drilling and doing the investigation on Monday, this Monday, 10/17, October 17th. Aztec, you may have seen them around, that's the group that's going to be doing the drilling. DC completed a ground penetrating radar survey, the GPR survey on these sites. They've done 12 borings. They've done bedrock and observation wells. And they've done some soil vapor analysis. They're in the process of trying to find responsible parties to do the work. They actually sought out people and said, hey, we think you dumped here. And this is why, and we want you to pitch in and do this work. And shockingly, they didn't get a response. So the DEC right now is taking it over for the time being. Eventually, we'll seek out the RPs. These sites, if it pans out that they're bad, they're contaminated, they may be listed as hazardous waste sites. And then if they are, they'll go into the Superfund program. And the DEC, all of us that live in New York State, paying taxes, will end up paying for the investigation and the cleanup, and then over time, a long time, they'll seek out the responsible parties. Want to come and run this switch?
Let me see something.
Work plan, which was written by a group called EA, Environmental. They're out of the Syracuse area. That's DEC's consultant. That work plan's in the library now. So for the P sites, the 2 north, 2 south, there's a work plan. Anybody, me, you guys, anybody in the room can go. I might run over there after this and read it instead of watching the Yankees. But it's
online as well.
it's there, so that way you can do both. You can watch the Yankees and read that. But all kidding aside, it's there and you can read it, and it's comprehensive, and it talks about the investigation they're gonna do on those 2 north and 2 south. And that's mostly what I wanted to let everybody know about the ongoing DEC work. And they found some soil vapors offsite. Oh, one last thing. It's on the record now that the PCE/TCE that we're seeing, the DEC is actually formally notified MediRay, who's on Marbledale, that they believe they're a source, one of the sources of the PCE/TCE contamination in soil vapor and possibly groundwater. So that's all on the public record. I've been saying that a long time. Maybe some of you guys have heard that, but anyway, it's on the record now. It's formally been issued, and they're investigating that. So there was another question here, right?
Yeah, just in terms of your timeline and when the final cap, the permanent cap will be in place on the site, do you know? Do you have just an idea when, what the stages are, how soon that's going to be actually covered up?
Okay, the question was, do we have a timeline for when the cap will be formally in place? I think we do. It's not set in stone, but 3 months?
We have to have the north side as far as we can going south towards the hotel pad. The concrete plant, or the asphalt plant closes, I think, for us in December. So between now and December, we'll have that whole thing binder
Okay.
at that point.
So are things moving along sort of at the progress that you expected, slowed down?
Well, we're a little behind schedule, but right now we have a plan in place, and that's basically what we're ended up doing.
When you were putting the piles in, did you find that you had, there was some question if they had any problems, vapors, when they put the piles in? Did you actually have to move any of your pile sites? Did you have
No,
to relocate
not
them?
really.
So the question was from the audience, when we were doing the piles, did we have to move any? I don't think we did. We didn't move any, did we?
The only thing that we moved is when we moved through rock socket. It had nothing to do environmentally.
All right, so Ron was in the audience. We moved a pile or two because these piles are set in rock. So you drill in, and we set what's called a rock socket. And if we hit poor rock where it was just not setting properly, we had to move over and reset it. I will point out, which I already mentioned, though, that at times, maybe I'm talking too loud. At times we had, our guys were out there monitoring vapors, etc., all the time, and we would hit some elevated spikes. So that's when we had the whole discussion about, well, let's get a portable blower in and start venting, so nothing's going to spread off site. So we did see some of that, and we did see the free product. The diesel fuel we had analyzed at one of the locations as well.
In terms of the easements that you mentioned, in case that somebody were to come in after the fact, need to put in more electrical lines or whatever, who oversees that and what's the process to be able to do it? Who's responsible?
Well, ultimately the DEC is. So it's on the record. So the village knows that on this particular site, if you were to trench or do X, Y, and Z for any future repairs, construction, you have to follow site management plan protocol dealing with the impacted soils.
And any contractor that would be doing that would have to be negotiating with the town of Tuckahoe?
Well, they'd have to say, we're going to put in a waste line, from here to there, here, you know, here's the specs, here's the depth, here's the distance, then deal with it accordingly. You're gonna hit 300 yards or 30 yards of contaminated soil. When you encounter that, your people have to be protected. Soil has to be stockpiled, disposed of off-site. I would say that they'll probably even have to go to the level of you have to monitor the air, just like we're doing now when you do the work.
So that information is disseminated to the contractors by the town
When they apply for the permit, yep, it's on the record. Mike,
Just a couple of things.
you want the mic?
Yeah.
You want the mic, Mike?
Not at all. Just a couple questions.
I don't think they can hear you.
Right? Hello? You can hear me. What?
I don't think they can hear you if you don't talk to the mic.
Hello?
Why is that thing doing that?
It's weird. It's probably the cord. It's either the cord or the connector.
You gotta do the Roger Daltrey thing.
I know, right? Swing it around. Or I can drop it. Hello? Excuse me. Okay. So a few questions. One is actually two questions about the Brownfield and then a couple of other peripheral questions. One is, so you just said that the DEC is using ground penetrating radar on the northern and southern sites. And did you guys use that? You did use that, right?
Yeah, we did.
Okay, you did use that. Okay.
So, if you remember, we did that whole survey, and there's a report that came out, and we did find some anomalies, and whatever anomalies we found were analyzed and looked into, and if we felt it was necessary, we excavated.
But you did that yourself, right? Or
Nope.
the DEC actually did it?
No, we hired a group out of New Hampshire, a geophysics that specialized in that called Hager Richter.
Okay.
Been around forever. They did that work, and they bid on the GPR north and south. Because I just saw the guy in Vermont last week, but they didn't get it. Someone else did.
Second thing is, a couple months ago, I think it was like a couple months ago, maybe 3 months ago, maybe longer, June-ish, May, whatever. A couple of stories came out that all the bad soil had been taken off the site. But now you're saying that you still get that, and I know that area, the one you're talking about, because it had all kinds of bottles and all kinds of stuff in it. But technically that was still there. So wasn't that a little premature for the developer to say that everything is kosher and clean, when in reality you still have some remediation to do?
All right. Well, first of all, it's never going to be kosher and clean site-wide.
I just meant above the...
Right. So we all know that.
Yeah.
Second of all, I think doing some of these presentations, my recollection is that, and I can go back with you and look at them, but I think we did say in the past that these areas were done with the exception of this area and another. There was one other area.
You did, but I'm saying what the developer and the lawyers said to the...
well,
that's what
I
I'm
got it.
talking
Okay.
about.
Well,
Yeah.
if that was said, then that was erroneous and misinformation.
So I just wanted to clarify that, because
Fine.
there's a, it's kind of like, Trump and Tillerson, they're not on the same page.
Not?
Another question for you. You mentioned MediRay, and we all know that, talk about MediRay. Now, you know that MediRay stores chemicals under the gym. And they do.
You know that.
Yeah, so that's why I'm telling you. They store it under the gym.
Okay.
So my question is to you that you might want to investigate is that area where the property abuts the
Gym?
yeah, to kind of monitor that, because we don't know, the fire department doesn't know what's in there. And they've been storing in there for years, and they own that building. So it might be something to check. Here's the gym here.
Yeah.
So this is where they store stuff, right under here. Okay?
All right,
Right
so,
through there.
so remember, we have a well right here.
Yeah, yeah.
That's a pretty high concentration. That's one of the areas of concern. That's where the SVE, one of the focuses of the SVE remediation is right in here.
Which is why, and
Well,
from,
it might make sense. Might make sense.
might make sense. It's just a question of if that's a source, then it should be something that should be, because they haven't been as cooperative as we like in the past.
Actually, we asked to drill there, and they denied us access.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
And the
So,
DEC's also asked. I just spoke with Kevin Carpenter about it, and they haven't been cooperative to date. But at some point, if the DEC goes through the proper channels, they can force the hand to drill on that property.
sure. The other thing you mentioned is the responsible parties. All those affidavits that we have from people, those could really come into play. I'm going to let Carpenter know that, because they, people that saw, like New York Tel, Con Ed, because there's PCBs in there, to have people that can at least start that process. Because we know Revlon did it, because we know the products, Mitchum and all that stuff there.
We have canisters.
We have canisters for proof, and that will defray the costs of the northern and southern sites, as well as whatever it defrays for you guys.
It might.
Possibly.
It's a long road.
Oh yeah, they're gonna fight it and they're gonna, borrows weather. Okay.
That's kind of a bunch of lawyers getting together, not people like me.
Oh, and one other question for you, and then one for David. I have a client that has solar panels, and they have you can go online, you can actually see how much power they're generating. Is there any way to have some sort of online monitoring of the SVE thing at some point, so you can just look at it instead of waiting for reports, or is that too cost prohibitive to have something that's online that just shows emission levels and things like that?
I think the telemetry and the technology is there to do that. Whether we can all agree that it should be done is another story.
Okay, but it's something to
It's
throw
definitely,
it out
we
there.
have systems going now
Okay.
to tell us.
Okay.
So it's definitely technology.
Okay, that's just wanted to throw it out there for part of the discussion. David, and a question for you. Do you think that, given the situation with the northern and southern sites, that at some point we probably should have some kind of a public meeting with the DEC to explain? I know stuff's online, but let's face it, not everybody goes online. Not everybody. Is there a plan for that at some point in the near future to sort of discuss that in a public forum so we know what's going on?
I think it's a little premature. Kevin and I talked about that quite a bit. You see the work plan online, it's 250 pages, it's going to take you a while to get through. It's just pre-characterization work that's going on right now. I think we're just way too preliminary to even sit here and talk about that. Let's wait till we get some of that data back, till the DEC actually has something to discuss with us. And then,
So like you would think how long?
I'm not going to speculate, I don't know.
Because the reason I say that is because part of the issue that happened from all the beginning was the communication wasn't there in the very, very beginning. And one of the things that the DEC says, and EPA, or what's left of the EPA, is that initially it's important to have all parties, the businesses, the residents, and everyone involved, to have a meeting so they know what's going on, so that trust factor is there. So I'm going to reach out to Kevin myself and ask him, Kevin, what do you think, regardless of where we are, even if it's a preliminary thing, just to sort of explain what the DEC is doing so people are calm, because we don't want to go through the same thing emotionally that we went through with the Brownfield.
See that, Mike?
All right, so Mike brings up a good point, and just so everybody knows, when I pulled out my chicken scratch notes here, this is to your inquiry about the DEC in a public meeting.
So
we discussed, we actually wanted to get this out there based on my phone conversations, updating them on this presentation. Kevin was kind of like, hey, when you go there, let them know, and that's why I conveyed all this to you guys. So if I had to, again, not speculating like Dave pointed out, but if I had to venture a guess, there's going to be a public forum for information to be distributed and questions to be answered on what's going on north and south of the site. I would say that's very likely it's going to happen.
Number one, Yankees 1, Indians 0.
One zip Yanks.
Number two, I saw an awful lot of yellow on one of your maps that I recall being described as Freon. Can you tell us whether there are exceedances of the Freon? Can you tell us the amount of the Freon that might be being generated?
Yes, so.
Can you tell us the source of the Freon?
So these numbers, I can't really read that on this wall here. It's like, is that 3,000? All right, so the question was, are there exceedances for Freon? And, what's that? Oh, you can? Okay. Okay, so the bold yellow is greater than 2 million micrograms per cubic meter. The lighter yellow line is greater than 1 million micrograms per cubic meter. And then to a lesser extent, the green lines, bold and lighter green, for PCE and TC earth, greater than 1,000 and greater than 500. So there's definitely significant concentrations of Freon, and to a lesser extent PCE and TCE, in the soil vapor, and they have to be addressed. In New York State, I'm pretty sure there's just the regulations are changing with the DOH, Department of Health. but there's only guidance values where they say if you have X, then you got to do Y, and that's what we're facing. If it's in the soil or the groundwater, in the soil we have cleanup objectives that we try and meet, or cap or deed notice, etc. And in the groundwater, there's ambient water quality standards you have to meet. So that's kind of how it works, and there's still a fair amount of work to do with mitigating the Freon and the PCE and the TCE. And that's what the SVE and the SSDS are designed to do, and the cap.
So you don't know at this point, in other words, the question's essentially premature about whether you're going to be able to mitigate it. You expect to be able to mitigate it?
All right, so the question was, do we expect to be able to mitigate it? And the answer is, we definitely will, over time, with what we're proposing, be able to mitigate it and have those concentrations drop off.
Okay, and then the third part of my question was, can you tell what the source might be for the Freon?
Well, we think it's a number of things, one of them being the canisters that were disposed there. We definitely have information that points to that. For PC and TCE, that's related to solvents and dry cleaning fluid, things like that. So maybe something was dumped there, but it's definitely there. And benzene's probably related to any kind of petroleum hydrocarbon gasolines that were gasoline that was dumped there.
Okay, my other thought was on the two B sites, north and south. So that's up to DEC to do it, the job for them. They're basically going to do it to their own standards. Is that correct?
So the question was, is the DEC on the two P sites, north and south, going to do the investigation to their own standards? They're going to follow, so the answer is yes. They're going to follow and direct. So they're not actually, like, Kevin and his group are not going to be out there like sitting in drill rig like Pat and I would be. They're going to hire someone like EA or somebody that works for them and pay them to be their geologist and their engineer, and they're going to oversee it. Pretty much the way they're overseeing us on the Brownfield site.
Okay, and are those companies supposed to do some kind of reporting on a regular basis? And if so, will we have access to those reports?
So the question was, will the companies have to report on a regular basis? And if so, will we have access? And the answer is yes to both. Like right now, Dave was just talking, the work plan's at the library. If you don't want to watch the Yankees, you can read that thing tonight.
Thanks.
And that's, if you have an insomnia problem, that'll take care of it. And I actually like what I do, but it would still put me to sleep right now.
I like what you do, but I also like the Yankees.
Me too.
So one more question regarding the E-site. So you get those vapor extraction systems in, and those are the areas where they'll be drawing the vapors out. Until the decision is made on not so much on the southern site, but on the northern site, the stuff flows that way. Will any of that vapor or whatever get extracted through the systems you're currently using until never decided upon to do the northern site?
All right, so Mike's question was if the P site north or south, right, south too as well, for the most part groundwater flows from north to south. His question was if we're designing an SVE system and they find stuff on the northern or southern portions, will our SVE system pick it up? And the answer is yes. It doesn't, we don't like tell it, stop it, you know, if stuff comes on from their property, don't clean it up, because if it comes on, we're going to clean it up. But if you guys recall, we've talked about it kind of ad nauseum. Our site and our volunteers not obligated to clean up anything off-site. So I don't really want to design a system that if the DEC finds a boatload of Freon north of us, I don't want to clean up their mess. I want the responsible party up there to clean it up. But that being said, there's definitely going to be some crossover. It's almost impossible, especially if wells, see like these wells down here, you can see the radius of influence going off the property. So anything that's coming from there, we're going to capture it and treat it. But we're going to try and avoid cleaning up everybody else's mess if we can. In a lot of cases, it's going to be unavoidable.
the restaurant pad being done simultaneously, or you're in stages on that?
Okay, the question was, is the restaurant pad being done simultaneously to the hotel? And the answer is nope, it's not. We haven't done a thing up there other than the 2 borings I told you guys about to kind of reconfigure and see if we had to redesign. Not we, they, geotech and engineering people had to redesign it. So the only thing that's been done related to the restaurant construction is those 2 additional borings and trying to get some more information about depth of rock and soil type. That might be a while. The restaurant might be a while.
Hotel will be first?
Hotels, yeah.
Horns. I feel like I'm with my kids getting interrupted every 5 seconds.
Oh wait, that's me that does that. So the hotels, this pile cast being poured, girders, beams, it's ongoing. And that's probably not moving along as rapidly as Ron and his group would like, but it's definitely moving along. Any other question? Everybody's good? All right, go Yanks.
Are you going to have another meeting?
I think the question was, are we going to have another meeting? I think this might be the last community meeting. If we're instructed otherwise, you know, the village, the mayor, et cetera, says there's a demand for you guys to come in and explain around Christmas or beyond, you know, we're game if they're game.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.